when I purchased my first property, I didn't have all of the knowledge that I have now about creative ways to finance. And so, to be perfectly honest, I used cash to buy my first property. As far as putting a down payment, it was like a 20% down payment on a property that was $700,000 because I bought a 10-unit apartment building. My W-2 afforded me the opportunity to be able to save. And I've always considered myself to be a saver. But at some point, my mindset shifted and I realized I couldn't save my way to wealth. And I wanted to be wealthy.
Welcome to the Share the Wealth Show, where minority professionals can learn to escape the racial wealth gap and catapult themselves into abundance. Your host, Nicole Pendergrass, grew her net worth from being negative to multiple six figures. Join her on her investigative mission to expose secret strategies of the wealthy so we can all have the tools needed to build the life and legacy we were created to possess. Now it's time for the show.
All right. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Share the Wealth Show. And this is the show where we talk about strategies on how to build, grow, and protect minority wealth. And today, I'm super excited. I've been wanting her to come on for a little while now, but we have Miss Nikki G on here, and she is a phenom. And I just can't wait to when I had my first phone call with her and she told me about her story and how things progressed, I was just super excited. I knew right away I needed to bring her on to share that story with you guys because I knew you would take so much gems and insights from it. Okay. Hey, Nikki, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Doing well. Crazy day, right?
Yes, crazy day for sure. But I'm glad
Okay.
that we are finally able to make this.
Yes, exactly. Same here. And another guest that I had on said she needed a glass of wine to decompress.
Oh,
And her just saying that, I was like, yes, I need a glass of wine. And I don't have any in my house right now. And I actually might go out and get some right after this
good for you.
because it's been a crazy year for me so far.
Yeah.
So I've needed multiple glasses of wine and my house is a little dry right now. So
Well, we might talk about this a little bit in the conversation later, but yeah, my weekend's been crazy because I, as you know, am an out-of-state investor. But this weekend, I was actually in town with my properties because I'm doing a turn, and so it was really an in and out trip. I'm gonna have to post something about like a day in the life or something. But yeah, so it was crazy, but I'm here and everything's progressing well. So.
Oh, good. Yes, we definitely are going to talk about that because I want to hear all about it. Um, and you see how we both have if you are watching on YouTube, you'll see it. If you are listening on your podcast platforms, you won't see it. But we both have on our investor shirts.
Yeah.
Nikki has employee and investor with employee crossed out. And I am an investor with a whole bunch of other words underneath, but we had to both represent within investor. Black women investors. I love it.
Yes, and I have to shout out Larry Pendleton for giving me this shirt, another investor, fellow investor. I think he's been on your show before. I can't remember, but
Yeah.
anyway, he is the person who was able to gift me this shirt. So thank you, Larry.
Yeah. And Larry, or if you look and search in Share the Wealth Show, Larry Pendleton, and you'll find the episode that I did with him. And Larry, I'm going to be coming after you for my shirt. I want a shirt too. Shoot, you never have enough investor shirts.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right. Before we get started, random question. Have you ever been really passionate about something and then suddenly lost interest?
Um, very passionate about something and suddenly lost interest.
Yeah.
Not really. Normally, if I take passion in something, like I'm all in. Seriously, that's more how I am. I can't think of a time where I've been really passionate about something and lost interest outside of maybe a project or something at work or school. That would probably be the only time I could say that may have happened.
All right. Well, I mean, I get that and understand because that's kind of my personality too, that once I'm like dedicated to something and I'm in, I just go down a rabbit hole. So
Yeah.
I'm like stuck in there for a little while. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Nikki G?
Yeah. So I am a mom, a wife. I still actually work my W-2 job, but I started investing back in 2019. So I've been a real estate investor now for about 5 years. I got interested and passionate about real estate investing when I bought my first property. And to your point, kind of went all in. And so I was able to essentially replace my income from my W-2 after a couple of years of investing in real estate. And so I'm super passionate about it. I'm super passionate about building wealth. And yeah, that's me.
Okay, so I definitely got to dig into that right now.
Okay.
Most people are wanting to invest in real estate to not only replace their W-2 income, but then remove themselves from the W-2. And I
Mhm.
heard you say earlier, you are still a W-2 employee, even though you've already replaced your income from that job. So why are you keeping your position? What are you doing? Is a passion, a love, you know, what drew you or what made you decide on continuing to stay in your W-2 job while you're still growing your
Yeah.
portfolio?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually, when I first started investing, I thought that it was great. I was seeing all these people talking about leaving their W-2. And so I was like, oh yeah, that sounds like something I would want to do. It didn't turn out exactly the way I had envisioned because being someone who was already a six-figure earner, I really was able to leverage my W-2 to acquire real estate. And so that's how I was able to grow so quickly, quite honestly, is all of the money that I was making from my real estate purchases those first couple of years, I was really just throwing back into my business, investing it back into the real estate business and still working my W-2. So I didn't need that money. I wasn't, looking for that money to satisfy a certain lifestyle or anything. I was just passionate about real estate and I wanted to build as many assets as I could. And so when I saw the power of that, not just the power of real estate, but the power of leveraging my W-2 to continue to build my real estate portfolio, I already, love my job as well. So for me, it's really about as long as I can continue to do both and they both make me happy and neither one really takes away from the other, or really, I should say, as long as my W-2 at this point doesn't take away from me continuing to build wealth through real estate, then I'll continue to keep both.
I love that. And you know why? Because you always, especially when you're in the real estate world and entrepreneurial world, everyone is always about being an entrepreneur and getting out of their job and leaving their job. But I do think there is power in leveraging your job intentionally to build your portfolio. And as long as you still have that job to satisfy your living expenses, then you can redirect your profits from your real estate into growing your real estate even further and more, so that by the time you're really ready to leave your job, like your W-2 or no, your real estate investments are way surpassing just what you need to live, and it can really sustain a higher calling of a lifestyle, like whether you want to live on the edge or you want to like have do philanthropy or you want whatever you want to do. Now your portfolio really supports all of that,
Right.
so that's a great mindset to have, and one I've been embracing slowly and painfully because I've been wanting to get on my job so bad for so long. And not that I hate my job, but it's more of I feel like it was in the way of me growing my portfolio. But at the same time, there are benefits. Like if I'm looking to get a loan and be financeable, having a job, even in the commercial space, is still kind of helpful, not for financing facts, but like you said, like to support lifestyle while my investments are growing. So
Yeah.
I could just go on a whole rant about that forever, but
Yeah.
I'll pause there.
Looking to build wealth with real estate? Are you all tapped out on YouTube University and ready to get help tailored to your specific situation and goals? Have you always known that you are a little different from the crowd, that you never liked following the status quo, and that you're just tired of living in mediocrity? You want to build wealth on your own terms outside of Wall Street? Well, then maybe the Microfamily Mavericks mentorship program can help with that. It's a community where I handhold you through the process of buying your first small commercial multifamily building, because not everyone is ready for 100 units out the gate. Why multifamily? Because it gives your rental income a hedge against vacancy. Imagine what happens when your single family rental tenant leaves, right? And why commercial 5+ units? Because you have much more control over increasing the building's value in the commercial space, and then in turn, increasing your own net worth. Starting small is a stepping stone to so much more, because then you can tap that equity and buy another building and another and another, and you get the point. So increasing your cash flow and your ability to be job optional along the way. It's all a part of the journey. So if you think big, but you want to start small, and if you know multifamily real estate is the way for you to open the door to building a life of freedom, abundance, and legacy, but you just need someone to guide you step by step, and you want to be surrounded by other people on the same journey, doing the same thing, then just click the link in the show notes to find out a little bit more about the Microfamily Mavericks, and I look forward to potentially seeing you on the inside. So now back to the show.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, I think that, like I mentioned before, it was definitely desirable, and it was like the new shiny object to say, oh, I'm gonna replace my job, I'm gonna leave my job, I'm a real estate investor now. There's a lot of people, they see the power of it, and that's what they decide to do. But like I said, it was a little bit harder for me because number one, when I purchased my first property, I didn't have all of the knowledge that I have now about creative ways to finance. And so, to be perfectly honest, I used cash to buy my first property. As far as putting a down payment, it was like a 20% down payment on a property that was $700,000 because I bought a 10-unit apartment building. My my W-2 afforded me the opportunity to be able to save. And I've always considered myself to be a saver. And so, I consider myself to be a saver, but at some point my mindset shifted and I realized I couldn't save my way to wealth and I wanted to be wealthy. And so really just, taking the experiences and the knowledge that I had from corporate America on, just really how to be someone who is, all in or really motivated and a high achiever, that type of person, and taking that and really wanting to invest it into my own business. Real estate was a way that I thought I could do that. And really, I feel like I've done that. So yeah, I just really just decided that I needed to combine the two to get the maximum result. And here we are.
Now, there's so much there that I already want to dig into. So, one, the first one I'm gonna go is that very first purchase. Um, and then I'm gonna ask about the journey of like any subsequent purchases and how many units did you have to get to that financial freedom number and how many units you have now? Because I always say it's not the unit count, it's the cash flow, especially depending on what you want to do. So you don't have to own 100 units, right? You can own 10 or 20 and be financially free, just depending on what your expenses are, right? So I'll get to all that. But the first thing is the first question about your first purchase, because I want to dig deep into that. If your very first purchase was a 10 unit, most people don't jump from none to 10,
I
right?
know.
Did you even own your single family? Like, did you own your own home at
Oh
that
yeah.
point?
Yeah.
So
So
you owned your own home.
I've owned my own home. I owned personal residences before I was married, as a single woman. Of course, getting married, my husband and I own property, our personal residence, et cetera. So I've had personal residences, but never
Never an investment.
investment property. Now, my
Okay.
husband has had investment properties, you know, in his life, pre me and after me, with me, et cetera. But no, this 10 unit was my first investment property.
And that's phenomenal in and of itself, because like I said, most people don't jump to like owning a personal resident to a 10 unit. Like everybody was going to like, oh, I want a duplex. And I'm like, oh, you could think a little bit bigger than that. Like you don't have to go for 100. Well, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, you said something earlier about intention, right? And so my whole thing with real estate was very intentional. Okay, so I was in a situation on my job where we were going through some reorganizations, and I've been in corporate America for more than 20 years. And so in my career, my work career, I have seen and been through so many different reorganizations and layoffs. Fortunately, I've not, knock on wood, I have not experienced that firsthand, myself being laid off. But it's something about, sitting at your desk and that day when they're laying employees off and calling people back to their, to HR, and then they don't come back, or they come back and they're being escorted out of the building. That leaves an image in your head. And I've seen that, like I said, at least 3 times over my 20-year career. Not with my current employer per se, but over that period of time. And so I always had this notion that I never wanted somebody to be that much in control over my income and my well-being, et cetera. But I didn't really know how I was going to make that happen and make that shift, because I didn't think that I wanted to necessarily own a business. Like, I didn't know what that business would be. There wasn't necessarily a product or service that I was super passionate about. But I do come from an entrepreneurial family. And so I knew that I would probably be an entrepreneur at some point. But I really didn't know that it was going to be real estate per se, until going through this, experiencing this, this reorganization. And essentially the role that I was in at the time was being eliminated. There were about 4 of us who were in a position, and what we were being told was that we were going to have to interview again for essentially the same job that we had. And so it really put a sour taste in my mouth. And so I went to my husband and I was like, hey, this is what's going on. And I was like, I don't like this. Something just doesn't feel right. And my husband, you have to know him, but he was just essentially like very nonchalant. And he said, Nikki, just replace your income, find something else and do something else. And I'm like, okay, that's easier said than done, right? And I have a cousin who is an investor and has been for a long time, and has tried to get me to buy real estate. Gosh, for when I bought my first single family home, he was trying to get me to buy a duplex then, and I was not trying to hear it, right? And so I reached out to him and I was like, hey, we're going through some changes at work, and I think it's time for me to start investing in real estate. And so, like you said, I said to him, so I think I need to buy a duplex and be able to replace my income. And he was like, first of all, you are not going to replace your income
with a duplex.
But this is me. Like, I really had no clue.
Yeah.
The power and how much I could actually make from real estate. And so that was my thinking at the time, back in 2018. And so he said, listen, if you're really serious about this, Nikki, come down here. Let's go look for property. He's in Virginia, I'm in Georgia. He's like, come down here. Let's look at some properties and let's see what we can find. And he's like, you got some money, right? And I was like, yeah, I got a little bit of money saved. So yeah, let's do that. And I think for me at the time, I didn't even realize that I could finance a commercial property, a 10 unit, or, whatever. I didn't even know that something over 4 units was commercial. Like, I didn't know any of that. I just knew that I could probably buy a duplex cash with, 6 figures, right? And so that's what I was thinking. And so long story short, I went on this trip with him to kind of go house shopping, right? And this 10 unit came on the market the day before I was going down there for the trip. I was going to be in town for a day. And so he had this list of properties that we were visiting, and this 10 unit. He was like, let's go look at this 10 unit. And when he said it, I'm like, well, first of all, how am I going to afford a 10 unit? He was like, don't worry about that. Let's just go look at it. Well, with, a lot of time with small multifamily or even large multifamily, you can't just show up and say, I want to see the property, or you can't even call the agent that day and say, I want to see the property. And so we couldn't get inside of any of the units because they've got to coordinate with all the tenants and all of that, right? So we go to the property and we essentially park in the parking lot, and he walks me around the building, around the exterior of the building. And as we're walking, he's looking at the roof, he's looking at the foundation, he's looking at the cars in the parking lot, he's looking at the tenants, he's just making all of these observations. And so we do that for, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 minutes.
Are you enjoying this episode? Then stop what you're doing right now. Head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It really helps our show get pushed to more people who are looking for the information that we're sharing here. We have to share the wealth. If you listen to us on YouTube, make sure you like the episode that you're listening to right now and subscribe to our channel. Then share the channel with somebody else. There are people out there looking for the information you're listening to right now, so make sure you share it with someone who you know needs it. Now, back to the show.
And we head back to the car, and he's like, if I was in the market to buy a property, Nikki, I'd buy this property today. And I was like, really? He was like, yeah. And I said, well, that's great, but I can't afford this building. And he was like, why do you say that? And I was like, because I told you I had some money, but I don't have $700,000. He said, you don't need $700,000. He's like, this is the way it works. So he literally takes out an envelope, some mail or whatever that was in the car, flips it on the back, and he's like, this is how this is going to work. He said, there's 10 units here. He said, let's say everybody's paying $700, $800 a month. Let's say $800. He said, so your revenue on this property is going to be $8,000. He was like, your mortgage on $700,000, maybe it's going to be, $4,000. So he was like, so that's already a good thing, because he said, in my mind, if I can finance a property and only have to give the bank half of it, he's like, I'm pretty good. And I said, but there's other stuff, right? And he was like, yeah. He said, you've got to pay your taxes, your insurance, the expenses. He said, I see a dumpster over here. I only saw one water meter when we were walking around. So that means you as the landlord are going to be responsible for water. So he, wrote all these figures down. And at the end, there was some money left. And he was like, that's what you call your cash flow. That's your take home money. And I was like, wait a minute. So how am I going to buy the property? And he's like, you're going to finance it with the bank. And I said, okay, well, what bank is going to finance me? Like, I don't even have, we've got this personal residence in our name already. Like, I'm not going to be able to get another loan, for this. He's like, no, you're going to do this as a business, all the things. But essentially, in 30 minutes, right, this visit to this property, he helped to change my mindset about what this property and what this building could do, right? And I was essentially going to have to manage it, but basically the tenants were going to be paying all the bills if I did it right. And so that's kind of how it happened. I put a full price offer in on the property, sight unseen, right? Because we've not been in any of the units.
Yeah.
But this property was on the MLS, so there were pictures on the listing. So we made the assumption that for the most part, the units would look similar to the photos. I made a full price offer contingent on financing and inspection. Okay. And so I'm nervous as I don't know what. So I'm like, well, what happens if they accept the offer and I've got to pay like, this money? And he's like, no, no, no. It's contingent on financing and inspection. So that gives you the opportunity to, number one, see the inside with an inspection. And number two, you've got to get financing from the bank. So you've got to get a bank to say, yes, I'm going to finance this property first. And if you can't get that, then you can walk away. He said you might lose your earnest money, but you can still walk away from it. So made this offer that night, got back on a plane, flew back to Georgia. The next morning, the agent called my agent and said, you're going to be the owner of this new 10-unit building.
Wow.
And the rest is history.
Oh my God. Okay. There's so much to unpack. Like literally you gave a blueprint right there. And so anybody listening, I hope you were writing that down and picking up so many gems and information that Nikki was sharing throughout that story. So first of all, your cousin, he's your cousin, right? You say cousin. He was doing literally, this is the definition, back of the napkin kind of analyzation, but this was back of an envelope analyzation in a car, like assuming some numbers.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And just being able to kind of see ballpark she didn't have a T12, she didn't have a P&L, a rent roll, nothing. Right?
Nope.
She didn't even walk all the units, which they all say that you can, but this is the thing. She had the plan to do that. But that does not prevent you from putting in the offer. So do your back of the napkin calculations, put in the best offer that you can with your assumptions. And as long as you have a contingency, like, okay, in every market, will that work? No, you might not get it. They might not accept your offer. You have to go get another one. But so what? They don't accept it. Find another deal to put an offer in. But that should not prevent you from putting in an offer, because you still have time to do your financial due diligence and to do your physical due diligence and to get financing from the bank. If it's a super hot market and people are waiving financing contingencies, maybe it might be a little bit harder for you to get a deal with a financing contingency in it, but it's still not impossible. I just want everybody to hear this story and see, like, she took action and flew back home and got the call the next day. Like, sometimes real estate happens fast. If she had waited and tried to analyze it further a few more days, she would have missed out because somebody else's offer would have been in there.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple other things that at the time I didn't realize this is what's happening. But in addition to all the things that you said, Nicole, number one, he was really acting as my mentor, right? At this time. So I had someone who was knowledgeable, that I really put all of my trust and faith in what he was telling me. And I did that, number one, not because he was my cousin, but because he himself is a very successful real estate investor. The only person in my family that I know who was living this life of, a millionaire and doesn't go to a W-2 and hasn't for a very long time. And so I had him as a mentor, as a coach, etc. And I trusted him. And like you said, he told me what to do and I executed. And then the other thing that I will say is that I was also prepared. Like I knew that I had access to capital, right? So that if I was to get this property, I would at least be able to pay the earnest money. Like I knew that. I knew based on what he was telling me, I knew that I could come up with the 20 or 25% that he was telling me that I would probably need should they accept my offer. So I had some things, already prepared. And I wasn't going into this thing like, oh my God, like I just won this contract. I'm now under contract. Now, how am I going to find it? Like I didn't have that stress and those worries because I had the mentor, the coach, and I had preparation and knowledge about at least, where that initial capital was going to be coming from. Now, did I know how I was going to pay the first mortgage? Did I know that the building was going to be 100% occupied and I was going to be cash flowing from day one? I didn't know any of that. I was just trusting what he told me and praying that it was going to all work out, and it did. So,
Well, the part of that is, so one, it's because before in another episode, we were talking about having fear and taking action through the fear. Even if you didn't have fear per se, you had faith. And I
yeah,
think that's just as powerful, right? So even if you have fear, if you have the faith to like take those steps, and you had that mentor that helped solidify your faith as well, along with any other sources, right? And that just make you push through. So the other question I really want to ask about that is 20% of 700,000 is a good chunk.
yeah,
That's like a $140,000 down payment.
yeah,
Most people that I know would be splitting a 10 unit and the down payment with someone else, like having a joint venture partner or something like that. And you did that all yourself.
yeah.
So where was the, even though you had it, there are people who have that saved up, and would be deathly afraid to invest that entire amount into one property.
Yeah.
What made you confident to put all of that money on the line?
A couple of things. Number one, I wasn't afraid to bet on myself. Um, that was number one. That's something that, has been instilled in me from family, from my husband. You know, you basically, what people were saying is, you've been successful pretty much at everything you've ever tried to do. Why do you think you're not going to be successful at this? And so that was number one. And I won't lie, my husband was the one kind of pushing me, saying, forget that job, replace your W-2. And so I had this confidence, like, I can do this. And oh, by the way, if it doesn't work out, he's telling me he's going to be able to, hold this house down or do whatever, I have to do, but, or whatever we have to do. So I would say that definitely, for that first property, for sure, having that confidence in myself, and then, also having the confidence, or the partner, so to speak, in my husband, who's saying, I got you, you can do this. And you know what, if we're if we're struggling in our home, for a little bit to make this work, and for you to get the education and understanding that you need, then it's worth it. So I would say that those are the two things that really gave me the confidence that I needed.
Okay. I love that. You did say that after a couple of years of investing, that you surpassed, or you met your expenses from your W-2 income, or
Yeah.
you met your expenses, or the income. Like your
Oh,
expenses, like
my,
your personal expenses, so you matched your income
yes.
from your W-2 job
Yeah.
after a couple of years. Was that from this first building, or did you get more by time to let you get to that level where you matched your income?
No, I got more. So, with the first property, and this was kind of my mindset, because I told you there was a situation going on with my job, and that was, I was essentially going to be walking away from that, right? Or at least that's what I thought. And so in my mind, I was thinking, I'm basically going to take this money, bet on myself, and if I can still contribute to my personal household, what I contribute, for example, to our mortgage today and whatever other expenses that I have, I think I can do this. And with that first property, it was just my portion of what I paid for our mortgage. When we wrote those numbers down, I told you at the end, he was like, you're going to cash flow this. Miraculously, that number was like equivalent to what my portion, in our home, my portion of what I would contribute to our mortgage payment. And so I
Mhm.
was like, you mean to tell me I can leave my job, if that's what it's going to come to, but I can still contribute to the mortgage, which is obviously the biggest expense that we have in our home. And that's not going to add an additional burden and stress on my husband. And he's already saying, kind of, you can do this and we'll figure this out. So that was really a no-brainer when I realized that I could, continue to contribute to the mortgage. And in fact, on that first day, at the closing table, whatever, I got money back, And that first month that I had to pay the mortgage, because it's not at the closing, right? You don't pay the mortgage for a little bit. So when I paid that first mortgage and I saw this money left over, I was like, oh my God, he was right. Like, this is really gonna work. So yeah, it just worked.
So what was the next purchase then?
So the next purchase, after the 10 unit, I had a family member who was looking to, she had inherited a home, a property, a family property. And so she had another home and she wanted to sell it, but she didn't want to really go through the process of having to deal with people coming through and looking at the property or fixing it up and all of that. So basically I had my first off-market deal because I said to her, like, I knew it was a really great area where she had this townhome and everything. And I wanted, by this time I'm like on social media and I'm hearing all this stuff about doing off-market deals. And I was like, I'm gonna do my first off-market deal. And so my family member and I discussed it. She had a figure in her head that she wanted to make from this property. And you know me, I was just like, I can do that. Me and the full price offer again, right? I was like, yep, I can do that. And it worked out. We closed on the property through a title company. I gave her what she was looking to make from the deal. And then I'm still working my W-2, by the way. And I've got this 10 unit working for me, right? And so I'm investing money from that 10 unit now into this property. So that's what I used to like pay her. And it had been 2 years. So I had a lot of money where I hadn't used that money. So I was basically just putting this money in the bank at the time that I was making from the 10 unit every month, because I wasn't having to use it to pay the mortgage because I still have my W-2. So long story short, I took that money, paid her what she wanted, and then put a mortgage on the property, right? And
So it was free and clear when you purchased it from her.
well, she actually, she didn't know. She had a mortgage, but she didn't want me to take over the mortgage because she had some other things she wanted to do. She didn't want it to affect her like DTI ratio and all of that.
Okay.
And so what I basically did was paid her what she was looking to get out of the deal by offering the amount that I needed to. And then I put a mortgage on the property. So I had to put obviously a down payment, right, on for the property for the down payment.
Okay.
But I had all of that, again, from the 10 unit that I had
The cash flow from the 10 unit.
for 2 years. So I did that. And then long story short, got a tenant in there immediately and was cash flowing $600, I think, from that single
On a
family.
single family
Yeah.
cash flow?
Yeah. The mortgage on the property was like $700 and the tenant was paying like $1,800. It's single family, so the tenant pays all the expenses, right? Everything. The taxes,
Ugh.
insurance she's paying. So, essentially the money that I used to, my relative didn't want to, like I said, she didn't want to spend any money doing anything with the property. And so I had to do a little bit of work just to get it to a point where I could rent it for what I wanted to rent it for. But I knew the potential of the property. I wanted her to keep it. I really wanted her, and she might watch this and she can attest. I wanted her to keep the property and I wanted to show her how to make this property do for her what I had done with my 10 unit. But she was just like, no, I'm not going to do this. Now she says, maybe in a couple years, Nikki, we'll do something. But at the time, she was doing the same thing I did to my mentor years ago. She was like, no, I don't want to deal with tenants and toilets and all this stuff. No, ma'am.
So you, what was I just about to ask? Crap. How much? Oh, that's what. How much did you have to put into the property to kind of fix it up?
I probably put about 10,000 into it. I mean, it was
Okay.
it was really good. I just had to paint, put in new floors. There was like a screen porch that I needed to have some work done on the screen porch in the back. painted the outside. There was a roof repair I had to do, but at the end of the day, I probably spent about 10,000.
Okay. And how much did you have to put for the down payment?
Let's see. So I ended up getting the property for, I want to say it was 205. Was that right? I think it was 205. And so 20% of that. Yes, 20% of that.
Okay. So about 40.
Yeah.
About 40. But then all of that, and that is all from the cash flow from your 10
Yeah.
unit because you weren't needing that cash flow. That's crazy. So the one strategy that I'm a big proponent of, especially just depending on if your cash flow is still getting built up, like depending on the type of property you're doing. If you're doing like a value add, you might not have as much cash flow in the very beginning, et cetera, et cetera. So I just say, like, once you have repositioned your property and you've increased the value, now you can refinance, pull that equity out, and then use that to buy the next property.
Yeah.
It's even, I mean, building up the cash flow takes about as much time as repositioning, a property. So in either case, but you could do both. Like in your case, let's say you were getting this cash flow, you're saving it up, and then after a couple of years, the value increases and you refinance. So now you have refinance money and cash flow money saved up, and you could buy double the next time or the next bigger one.
Exactly.
So
now remember, I'm always doing things with intention, right? And so part of buying that property, number one, was getting the experience of doing an off-market deal, getting the experience of not having a realtor involved, but working directly with the title company, coming up with the contract, doing all this stuff. Like, I wanted that experience. I also mentioned that I'm a mom. And so in my mind, I was thinking, if I walk away from my W-2, these kids got to go to college one day. And so that property, that single family property for me was, okay, by the time this thing is paid off, I can do exactly what you said. If my oldest needs money to finance her college, I'm going to use this property for that. So yes, that's the intention of that property, is to be for, her college education if needed. Hopefully she does some other fabulous things and we don't have to have that, and I can use that property to buy more property or to buy a property where she's going to school and then she can rent it out to other students and we can make money that way. But there's so many things you can do, but that was the intention, and that's why I haven't, let's say, pulled any additional money out of that property yet.
Okay, guys, don't kill me, but I'm going to have to cut this episode short. This is too juicy, and we need to do this in a part 2. So stay tuned for the next episode that airs, and you can hear the rest of our conversation.
Did you love this episode of Share the Wealth Show? Be sure to connect with Nicole by following her on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook. If you picked up any of the gems that were dropped by today's guest, make sure you not only put them in your bag, but if you know of someone who would benefit from this information, don't keep it to yourself. Share the wealth and make sure to leave us a rating and review. We'll see you for next week's episode. Subscribe so you'll be notified.